Greetings, everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of Teaching Tales. I am your host, Brent Coley. This is the podcast, once again, if you've never listened before, podcast totally devoted to sharing stories from the world of education. I am an elementary principal in beautiful Southern California, and joining me today, I'm thrilled to have the amazing, edu-awesome Cate Tolnai. Cate, how you doing?
Hi, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure. I know we've tried to get our schedules to mesh so we could get a chat scheduled, and we've finally done it. So I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about today. But before we dive into our stories, let anyone who is not familiar with Cate, who is Cate? What does Cate do? Who's Cate?
Well, currently I'm working at Q, which is so surreal. It still feels like it's dreamy. How do I say? It's great. I really do think that my job as the director of member engagement at Q is it's totally set me up to be a cheerleader for all the people around us that are just doing really good things, and it's pushing me out of my comfort zone, which is great. Most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. Always fun, but good.
Yeah, because I spent 10 years teaching mostly middle school history, and then I was 4 years a tech coach at the district and county level, and then here I am now and doing marketing and communications, and I'm marketing to the products, which are people, which is the learning, and I'm marketing it to people like me, and so it's every day's an adventure, and the team's amazing, and yeah.
That's awesome. No, that's congratulations on your new position. You're perfect for it. So today we were going to talk about, when you and I had kind of messaged on Twitter to talk about, well, what kind of stories do we want to share? I know that I saw one of your sessions at a conference last April, on gamification, on making professional development, learning, anything regarding education, making it fun. The buzzword is gamification, and that is right up your alley. So tell us some stories, or and if you want to maybe start with, for anyone who is, what is gamification? That's not in the dictionary. What is gamification? And then if you can share some ways that you have seen gamifying or making learning like a game benefit students.
I love how you ended, and I'll segue with that gamification is about making learning like a game. It is not using games for learning. So for example, sixth grade history, having the kids create a board game and having the question cards be about the unit that they studied. That's game-based learning, and it's awesome and it's fun. But gamification is really different. It's when you take a situation that is not a game at all, let's say a unit review, where there's a big test coming up, kids need to cover a bunch of different stuff, and you have them answer the questions and then run up and shoot a ball into a basket, and they get points for their team on top of actually doing the learning. So it's taking an activity or a lesson that is not a game, and it's adding what we call game mechanics to it. So this layer of gamification over it. And a lot of times when I've talked about this, people are surprised at the fact that they are actually gamifying their classroom by, creating a point system, even giving kids choice, having, pulling random numbers and having kids participate that way. I mean, all those game mechanics are valuable. And I think most importantly, I want teachers to kind of honor that they are doing that good work. Instead of saying, it's too scary, it's too new, it's buzzy. It's actually something we've been doing a long time.
Exactly. I mean, how many times have you, like you mentioned, reviewing for tests or something like that, where we've made it into a game? Mm-hmm. When you said you taught middle school history for
10 years. Yeah.
Career. 10 years. I mean, can you give me an example of how you did something like that in your classroom?
Well, some of my favorite game mechanics, I think, for the classroom, back when I was using it, I would often give my students opportunities to choose, which is a game mechanic, right? Choose their own paths of learning.
Mm-hmm.
And at this, and also allow them to award themselves points by self-assessing. So those are two game mechanics that I leveraged often. There was this one unit that I taught every year that was about the Mesoamerican cultures. And there's so much. I mean, you can spend a whole year talking about the Mayans, the Incans, and I mean, you could go on. And I felt this pressure to cover so much. And then I was like, time out. Why am I working so hard? Like, why don't I let the kids choose one or two areas of interest that they really want to pursue? And so we started this unit by just brainstorming a ton of different ideas and allowing kids to just organically figure out what they're curious about, right? So that choice and taking the judgment away from it. There's really no wrong way of brainstorming up on a big whiteboard. And then once the kids made their choices, it was about walking them through the research process, which is not a game. Let's clarify. The research process for 7th graders is not a game. But when you start to add elements, again, when you start to release them into the world of research with strategies, and you empower them to make choices and partner up and work together and create learning opportunities that are truly based on their interests, that's when you get these really amazing projects. And then the self-assessment piece where they're putting points and using rubrics to do that. I mean, I definitely wanted them to be in charge of articulating their progress. So, I mean, that's kind of a looser version of gamification. I think when I've really gotten into it is when I've been working with teachers.
Yeah. So how have you done that?
Yeah. So teachers are a lot like middle school students when you teach them. We're just wiped out. We got a lot of stuff going on and we're distracted. And many times, there are other places we need to or would rather be. And so I really take it upon myself. It's my responsibility as the facilitator to make something fun and make it memorable and help people connect emotionally to what they're learning. And one example that I have really toured around with the last couple of years is something I call PD Dice. And I literally went to the raft in our area. And if people don't know what that is, it's the resource area for teachers. There's a couple of them in California and one in Colorado. And it's basically where these companies will dump a bunch of their extra stuff. And it'll be super cheap for teachers to go and grab. And there's also there's
like
just
furniture, like anything, like furniture.
Anywhere from like old CD cases that people would repurpose for like maker, a huge bin of wine corks, not used, but like wine corks, which you then turn into like God knows what, you know what I mean? There's just tons of, really like papers. And then there's also some packaged resources that are just cheaper. So long story short, I grabbed this container for $2 of these little 1-inch die, these wooden die, and I wrote I typed out on sticker paper these questions, these debriefing questions. So what's your golden nugget? What are you curious about? What do you want and what do you have a question about? And so I created these prompts. I just stuck them onto the dice. And every time I have a PD, I just put them on the tables so that I'm ready and the people will be ready with the resources they need to just roll the dice and talk. Because how hard is it to get teachers to be like, all right, what worked? What didn't work? Tell me what you thought. Like a lot of times that's when it's hard to get them to talk. Yeah. And so this is a way to roll a die and like let the dice be the guide. And so putting that game mechanic over the conversation piece is one of my favorite ways of gamifying my PD. Yeah,
well, and everybody, everyone's played games, whether it's Monopoly or Sorry, or how many or Yahtzee. There's something about rolling the dice, or in Vegas, depending on what your pleasure is. There's something about dice. I used to do something with dice in my classroom. We were talking before we started recording. I try, and again, I don't know whether or not, and you can correct me if this falls into the category of gamification, but I think going back to what's the purpose? It's making learning fun, because if you make learning fun, kids are going to be more engaged. So that reminds me of something that I used to do in my classroom. Didn't have anything to do with technology, but it had to do with dice. It was vocabulary. One of the things that our district did is we had explicit vocabulary words that we were required to have the students learn. There were 20 weeks worth of it, and we did 5 words a week. So after 20 weeks, we had 100 words. And you know what happens with spelling tests and stuff like that. You do your test at the end of the week, and what happens to the words of the kids after that?
Out the window. Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, after 20 weeks we'll be done. There's 36 weeks in the school year. I don't want this to just be poof, gone. I want to make sure that we can reinforce this. So I just totally came up with some game that I called
Define It. And what I did was I took those 100 vocabulary words, wrote each word on a separate index card, and pasted them on a whiteboard to basically make a 10 by 10 grid. And then I took those cards and dice, put the kids into teams, and each day I would go ahead and give the dice to students.
And I would give them the dice. I would give the team the dice, and I would say, okay, roll the 2 10-sided dice. The first number on the first dice and the second number gives you a number between 1 and 100. And then what would they do? So if they rolled a 6 and an 8, okay, number 68. And we would take the word there. And basically it was, if you can give me the definition, if you can remember it, your team gets a point. If you can use it in a sentence, your team gets a second point. If they couldn't define it right away, I would give them the sentence. And then they could try to determine the meaning from context clues, which is one of the things that we were teaching kids how to do, how to determine unknown words. So they had a possibility of 2 points. And if they didn't know the definition, they could learn from context clues and get 1 point. But then what we did was and I'm going to use the word gamified. I added, okay, boys and girls, today the even numbered cards are worth double points. So if they rolled 68, wow, now you get 2 points for defining it, 2 additional points for using it correctly in a sentence. So you had a total of 4 points. And then some days I would be like, and the multiples of 5 are worth triple points. And it was so cool to see the kids. It was vocabulary. It was what's the definition of a word that they were eating it up because I was putting dice in front of them.
Right.
And by adding those elements like, hey, double points, triple points, no team was ever out of it. That was the beauty of it. If you had one team, because nobody likes to lose, and you got that, it's like, I'm 50 points behind. Not that everyone would get that far behind, but if they were 20 points behind and it was perfect, sometimes it's like, no, these are worth 5 times the points. A team that was in last place in one day could catch up. It was. But does that meet the definition of gamification?
Yeah, it's putting game mechanics, it's laying game mechanics over an activity that is not a game, which is really like adding that layer over the vocabulary exercise. And as you were talking, I was thinking, okay, here we are talking about dice and we're talking about points, and those are probably like a very simple entry point into this. One tool that I got off of Amazon, I think I paid like $60 for this spinning wheel. It's like, when you go to fairs or carnivals or concerts and it goes brrr, tick, 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 right? And then wherever it lands, you usually get a prize. Well, I I don't have prizes to give away, but I started presenting with this spinning wheel. And so, and I can personalize and change the text all around it using a whiteboard marker. So what I did one time was I put the little icons for like 16 of the Google apps. And wherever it landed, I asked them a quiz question on a Google app. Or I had them tell me something they know how to do inside of that app, right? So it's so the learning is really the prize. And then I've also used it, this is at ISTE, I was doing a poster session on gamification with Lindsay Blass and Christina Mattis. And all I did was I put 16 different game mechanics on this wheel. Or no, I did 8 of them and I did it twice. So there's 8 different game mechanics. And I had people spin, and people were really fixated. They were like, "Ooh, I get to win something," right? Because it's totally usually given with like prizes. And so they'd come up, so I'd hook them in that way, and I'd be like, "Spin the wheel, like it's the wheel of gamification," and they'd spin it, and it would land on something like failing, opportunity to fail as a game mechanic, which is a really important game mechanic to consider. We haven't even talked about that, but opportunity to fail. And so what I said to them was, how do you how do you create opportunities to fail in your classroom? Like safe places to fail. And so the next thing I know, we were into a conversation. The teacher was telling me about an activity here or an opportunity here. And I looked at them at the end of every interaction and I said, do you know you gamify learning? And they were like, oh, really? Wow. And it was one of those eye-opening moments for me too, because I was like, wow, this is a really important role that I can play in helping people just unpack the strategies that they're already using with something as simple as a spinning wheel. I mean, it really can just be that simple.
Well, and I'm trying to think, you may have had the wheel when I saw you present at Lead 3, and I'm thinking
it was at fall, spring.
You did have the dice. You did
have the dice.
I remember the dice, but I'm thinking now as a site administrator who is responsible for PD with teachers and stuff like that, something like that wheel or dice or something like that is going to introduce the element of, I don't know if chance is the right word.
That's an element. It's a game mechanic. Chance is a game mechanic.
That it's like, I don't know what we're going to have to talk about next.
Out of my hands.
Put people on their toes in a good way, that it's not like, oh geez, here we go again, another boring staff meeting, which I'll readily admit I've been responsible for, and we've all sat through them, and I will readily admit that I've been responsible for planning them. So that's one of the things that I'm excited about having a conversation like this is, okay, what can I take from this?
Yeah.
And like that wheel or that dice, I'm right now I'm thinking, and for any of my teachers who I know a few of them listening here, now they're going to hold me to this. So I'm putting myself out there that I'm going to have to introduce something like this, but shoot, I got a lot of dice. I mean, that's easy.
Right. And the other thing I was going to say is, I think what you might have been thinking of from Lead 3 is there is a virtual wheel that you can put up to 100 wedges, if you will. So you can CSV upload people's names or tasks, or I've seen people, like I did recently for the Sketch 50 growth mindset movement we did with sketchnoting. Mm-hmm. I took all 50 of the prompts, put it onto a wheel, and now I'm offering that as like a 2.0 version of Sketch 50 and a way to just gamify even further. So you spin the wheel, whatever it lands on, you draw. That's it. And so imagine if you had people's names in there, or maybe initiatives or elements of your PBIS program, or I mean, there's so many things you can do. And that one's free. It's wheeldecide.com. Wheel, like a wheel, a car wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like the gift.
Well, and another, gosh, I'm thinking you could do that in a staff meeting. You could do that in the classroom. That's the whole picker. Like, I'm spinning the wheel. Who's going to be the next one to share something awesome that they're doing? And you've got everybody's name up there. So we'll help ensure that people are paying attention and engaged. So
yeah, and you can even do it with like elements of a unit of instruction. Like you could take a unit, like going back to that Mesoamerican unit, like, unpack all these cultural elements of these different civilizations, and wherever it lands, that's what we're going to learn about today. Yeah. We're going to go on a web quest. We're going to create a hyperdoc. We're going to create an Iron Chef slide deck. Like, we're going to just let the wheel decide what passive learning we're going to take. And it does depersonalize that learning process in a way that allows the teacher or the facilitator to be a part of it rather than the pusher of it. And I think that's a really important cultural shift too, is once you are spinning the wheel to decide what the group's doing, you are now a part of it, rather than doing it to them, which I think all teachers really want. I would hope all teachers really want to be there.
No, exactly. Well, and again, if it's a student in a classroom, you're going to want to be part of that and take some ownership. That's the word that kept popping into my head. Wow, I'm part of this. I have some ownership in this. And if I'm a teacher at a staff meeting or a PD session, oh, I'm part of this. Like, I love how you worded that. It's not being done to me. I'm being, but
I'm a part of what we're doing.
Exactly. No, that's, and I just think the bottom line, I mean, for anyone listening, this is what I'm taking from it is, number one, we're already doing this to a degree. I mean, I think most teachers at some level, they're already introducing some game mechanics. But number two is just, gosh, if you can make it fun. I mean, the level of engagement obviously is going to rise. I mean, think of Kahoot. Of what Kahoot, I mean, that is a game. That's a different thing. But when I walk into classrooms just for casual walkthroughs and see kids doing Kahoot, I mean, engagement is through the roof. So, yeah. The more fun we can make it, the more learning is going to happen because the engagement is higher.
Well, and the emotional response is higher. And that's where I think, and I'm not studied up enough on the brain's research to really talk too educationally about this, but I know even just as a learner, when I have an emotional connection to something I've learned, when it's made me laugh or it's made me feel something, or whatever, or it's made me even angry or frustrated, like I remember that on a very different level. And when you add game mechanics, you're creating an emotional level to the learning that will resonate and that will sustain over time. And that's an important thing to remember too. It's not gimmicky as much as it's just really impactful learning. And I probably should get more read up on that brain research because it's powerful.
No, but I think that the story that pops into my mind was in college, my then girlfriend, now wife, we went to a banquet that they were playing bingo. Like it was at the end of the night, they had bingo. And I remember that like it was yesterday because they were giving away TVs. I mean, they were giving away good stuff and I didn't win, but I was very disappointed that, but by doing that, they had me enthralled, like, oh my gosh, I've got a chance to do this. And there's something about the chance of quote unquote winning something, when really what we're trying to do is just make them learn. Well, I mean, winning equals learning. If they think they're winning, but they're actually learning, we win as teachers. We win as leaders of schools or districts or whatever it is. So now
I want to go play games.
Exactly. Exactly. Everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to play games. That's so yeah. Anyone listening, I mean, that's the message. That's the moral is, boy, if we can make our classrooms, our schools, our staff meetings, our PD sessions more fun, more game-like, people are going to have more fun. If they have more fun, they're more engaged and they're going to learn more. So
yeah. And honestly, like we ran through so many different resources right now. And I just want to make sure that to your listeners, if there are questions that they have, or if they are hungry for kind of opportunities or some of the links or anything, to please reach out to me on Twitter. That is the easiest way. I'm very available on Twitter. It's at Cate Tolnai. And I just want to help your kids have an amazing learning experience. But I firmly believe that if we don't create learning experiences that matter for the teachers, it will never get to the kids. So kids deserve it. Yes, absolutely. But so do teachers. And so my mantra is let's arm those teachers with the best professional learning we possibly can.
No. Oh, preach it, Cate. No, you've inspired me. And this is, I benefit just as much, if not more, from anyone who happens to be listening to these episodes, that kids deserve it, but so do teachers. That's great. I mean, that's, and I need to remember that as the one who is planning learning experiences for teachers. They deserve to have a fun time as well. So, and you mentioned on Twitter. I mean, that's how we virtually met was on Twitter. And for anyone listening, she's a great follow, great resources. And if you ever have an opportunity to see her present at a conference, because it is definitely worth it. So
thank you.
That's CateTolnai.
Nice work. Yes.
That's right. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Totally appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
I know you're busy, and for anyone listening, Mom, Dad, thank you so much. And Cate, if your mom and dad are going to listen to this now, usually the guests, I'll have my mom and dad listen to it. Then we'll have 4 listeners. So,
hey, and I want to thank you too, Brent, because opportunities like this don't come along every day, and just, the work that you do and how you're willing to stand up and provide these resources for others is just a huge gift to the community. So kudos to you, and much thanks to you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have fun doing it, and I'm hoping that people are getting something out of it. So thank you. I appreciate that. And for people listening, thank you. We appreciate I appreciate you listening. And remember, you can subscribe in iTunes or Google Play. That way you don't have to keep checking the website. You can also go to my website at brentcoley.com on the podcast page, but subscribing is the best choice, because then, boom, every time you pick up your phone, it's going to tell you when a new episode has been published. So until next time, everyone, thank you so much, Cate. Thank you for taking the time. And we will see you next time. Have a good one.